Welcome back to another episode of the IT Investor Podcast. I am Pramod Gudishetty, joined by my co-host Wally Taylor. Today, we have got a special guest, Daniel Huffman, Vice President at Huffman Group. We are going to dig into his background, his company, the build-to-rent model, and his current project called Cedar Mills in Carrollton, Georgia. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Thanks, Pramod, Wally. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, Daniel. Great to have you here. Let's start by getting to know you a little bit. Tell us about your background in real estate and what led you into the build-to-rent space.
Sure, yeah. So Huffman Group's a family company started by my father when I was pretty young. I've been around construction and real estate most of my life. So, from a young age, my father would bring me out as a kid and, he'd show me how to shoot a level. And then pretty quickly after that, I'd be like, okay, son, go clean up the construction site, So it was kind of a, love and hate relationship for construction for a little while when I was younger because I thought of it more of like a chore. But as I got to know it more and more, I kind of loved it. And when I was, in high school, I kind of picked up and did some subcontractor work on the sides. I'd go do some gutter work, or I had a little trim crew one summer. Then we did trim work on some houses and things like that. And then as I got into college, decided that, construction management or building science was kind of the route that I wanted to go. And that gets some, quick background of me. In 2009, when I got out of school, there wasn't a whole lot of construction going on because of the downturn. And so I came back and started working with my family, and they had started buying up single family homes at the time in the Atlanta area where we're based and renting them out. So that was kind of our first, beginning into multifamily.
Yeah. So, Daniel, Huffman Group is actually based in Atlanta. And this is a family-based business, if I'm correct, right? That's what you were alluding to.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And can you share what the company stands for and what makes your team different from other developers in the market?
Sure, yeah. So, at Huffman Group, we kind of got instilled from a pretty young age that, honesty and doing what you say you're going to do and treating others like you'd like to be treated were kind of some of our, first things instilled at us, and some of the things that we use in our company. We like to be extremely transparent with our investors, what's going on with our projects, and, trying to grow in a sustainable way, not something that's too fast or too slow. Just over the years, we've gained a lot of experience, and, we don't want to bring somebody in as an investor into something that we don't feel like we're very experienced and can handle. So those would be a few of our mottos and some of the things that we stand for.
That's kind of a breath of fresh air. I heard honesty and doing what you say you're going to do. Those things actually surprisingly kind of stand out when you talk about, general contractors and construction companies.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
That was something my dad kind of just drilled into us. He's just like, if you say you're going to do something, you better do it. If you say you're going to show up for a meeting, you better be there. Even small stuff, not just necessarily big things, but even small things like, don't say you're going to be somewhere, or don't say you're going to do something unless you actually mean you're going to do it. So
yeah,
Absolutely.
Everything starts from the small stuff.
that's true.
Hey, let's talk about build to rent for a second. I mean, that's your kind of your bread and butter now. A lot of our audience is familiar with the traditional multifamily asset class, but build to rent, it's been popping up here in the last couple of years. It's newer to a lot of investors, probably especially ours, or a lot of our listeners. Can you explain that model in simple terms and why it's becoming so popular?
Yeah, so I'll just start from, the simplest form. So build to rent is essentially, a home community that's all for rent, right? So it kind of first started off with what we call scattered site single family rentals, which, started to get pretty big after the downturn. So some of these big hedge funds came in and bought, thousands of homes around the US. And you had a lot of scattered site single family rentals. And I think, what we found and some of these big guys found that it's pretty difficult to manage scattered site single family compared to a multifamily complex where you may have 100 to 300 units in one place, right? Got to have guys driving around. It gets a lot more complicated. And so I think because of that, some of these groups started moving into these build for rent communities. And I think because the demand was so large for, people wanting to rent homes, you saw, some of these groups going to large builders and basically buying up an entire community of homes in places like Texas, where I've read a few stories about, some of these, large equity firms coming and basically buying up for the same price, possibly more than what they anticipated selling them to the open market. And that, I think, was kind of the start. And so, over the years, BTR has become so popular, and then it started to morph into different types, right? Originally, normal single family home, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, 2 to 3 bath, double car garage, on a normal sized, lot, quarter to half acre type thing. And then, they're kind of like, okay, what about moving into something like townhomes or a cottage style home? How would that look like in a built for rent community? What kind of demand would there be for that? And the progression has kind of moved in this direction. We found that, when COVID occurred and a lot more people have been able to work remotely, the place that they lived wasn't as important as being as close to work as it used to be. And so we've seen a lot of people move back out into the suburbs and they want more space. They're working from home, just like I am today. And, the house that they're living in and the amount of space they have became more important. And so what you can provide with a built for rent community becomes much more attractive to a whole lot more people in that situation. Cottage style, same things. From our opinion, the traditional garden style apartment complex, it's a 3-story, 4-story walk up kind of place, is becoming less attractive to more renters when they can have a product that doesn't have somebody that's living above and beside them, right? When they can have a yard that's directly outside of their unit that they can let their dog out to, right? They've got some green space around them and they can have some of the same amenities that they would have in a normal apartment complex with a pool, gym, and those kinds of things. And so that's where the built for rent cottage style, product has started moving towards.
Yeah, and just out of curiosity, Daniel, are cottage style homes similar to townhomes or it's different?
Let's say yes. So many of our cottage style units would be the exact same size as a townhome for the most part. Now, in the product that we're going to talk about today, Cedar Mill, we have some, almost the same breakout of 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms that you would have in a normal apartment complex, right? Which is unusual from traditional BTR because all those homes would have been 3, 4 bedroom unit, full size homes, right? So we get to pull back a little bit and say, okay, well, we can now cater to somebody that just wants a single bedroom unit, but they still get some of those same amenities. They have, yard spaces they can walk out to. They've got a pool. They've got all these things that they would have in a traditional multifamily place, but a little bit more privacy, right? And so one of the units we did was kind of a stacked 1-bedroom unit over a 1-bedroom unit and creates a little 2-story looking cottage. And then some of the 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units are standalone. They may have a double car garage. They may, park on the street. We have two kind of different combinations of parking for the units as well.
Yeah, that's great, Daniel. So from investors' perspective, how should people think about build to rent compared to multifamily? Where is this similar in terms of risks and returns? And where does it differ, especially when it comes to holding periods?
Yeah, I'd say the risk and return are similar. I'd probably argue that built for rent has become a more popular asset class, and I think it will continue to do so over traditional multifamily. And that will differ completely on where it's located. Like there are still large metros where you can't buy the amount of land that's needed to do a cottage style BTR. You're going to have to go vertical with some of your units, right? Condo style or garden style. And so I think there's still room for those product types, but I think when people can, they're going to start gravitating towards this product type more and more. And I think one of the big things to note too is that in today's environment, you can't go buy a single family home for anywhere close to the same monthly payment that you can rent that same home for. And that's another thing that's really pushed, I think, the BTR product to be so popular. There's, a lot of young people that can't afford to buy a home right now, but they can rent one. And so, and they're, I go through a lot of advantages to renting with some people who kind of argue with me that we're not building enough homes for sale and we should be pushing more homes for sale. And my point is always there's always room for sale and for rent. And one of the reasons that I think for rent's becoming popular is that for people that may be on a fixed income, right, they're making a certain amount of salary. If they were to go buy a home and maybe it's not a brand new home, they could have an air conditioner that needs to be replaced in the first year. You're talking about $5,000 or $6,000, right? So from a budgeting perspective, when you go to rent something, like what your rental payment is for 12 months, like it's fixed. You don't have to worry about, and many of these communities, especially the cottage style, we're cutting the grass, we're replacing the air conditioner, the roofs, dishwasher, anything that goes bad in the unit, we're taking care of. And so from them, it's very easy to budget that way. And some people, if you're traveling a lot, this gives you some more freedom in that kind of arrangement. You're not having to take care of all those things yourself. You can concentrate more on work or, whatever it is that you'd like to spend your time on besides maintaining your home.
Yeah, and these properties which you are building are brand new, so they get to have a very good experience. And
Hmm.
maintenance wise, for your property management, also, I don't see any maintenance issues.
Yeah, I mean, they're all new units that we're currently building. But I mean, just over time, like, me and my wife have even looked at this ourselves. Like we go to look at purchasing a home, and in some of the areas that you may like to be, you got to purchase an older home, right? And you still may be a $500,000 to $1 million, and it needs more work. So, and the payment would be higher than if we went to go rent something of similar nature.
Yeah, you definitely nailed that there too with that 12 months of something that's fixed you can kind of budget and plan for. And then I also kind of think that like the younger generation, there isn't that desire just yet for them to even own homes. A lot of the kind of this next group coming up, they're very interested in, you mentioned traveling or being able to like move about without being stuck in a home however long that
Yeah.
takes. You buy a home and if you decide to move, you've got to figure out renting situation or try to sell it. Like that's a headache for some people. So
Yep.
I think that's why I
And so
built.
many of us around our age, lived through the downturn of 2009 and saw what
Yeah,
happened to maybe our parents' home
sure.
values. And so I think this idea that it has to be your greatest store of value and that the values will always go up, was, a little bit cut to its knees in that time.
It's definitely shifted.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this current project right now. Cedar Mills. Give us kind of the big picture, number of units, location, timeline, and why this project stood out as the right opportunity for you guys.
Yeah. So Cedar Mill is almost like a phase two to a project that we started called Cedar Walk. It's in Carrollton, Georgia, which is west of Atlanta. um, kind of going towards Alabama. We're about an hour from, I'd say, like the center of Atlanta to Carrollton. It's a little far out suburb, but you still have some people commuting from there inside to Atlanta, and maybe it's some industry and stuff that's on the west side of Atlanta. You got University of West Georgia, so it is somewhat of a college town in Carrollton, and then you have some pretty big industry drivers. Southwire, one of the largest wire manufacturers in the world, actually, and in the U.S. OFS is a fiber manufacturer, fiber internet, and a couple other kind of manufacturers like that do employ a good number of people in the area, and they've got a few more factories coming that way. Carrollton's seen, fair growth as a city and also in their wages. And one of the things that really hit us when we picked up Cedar Walk was that there wasn't much new product in the city. And when we started researching it, we found out that there was a previous city council that was in place that basically had a moratorium on market rate multifamily for about 10 years. So for the past 10 years, there was one market rate complex that was 100 units. It was actually active adult, so it was age restricted. And then there was a couple student deals. So other than that and Cedar Walk, that was all that was built. And so you've got a really aging, multifamily product in that city with an average age down in the low 80s for their apartment complexes. And so we felt like there was really a need that the city council kind of shifted over to some new people. They'd gotten a research firm, KB Advisory Group, to come in and do some research on what they needed to do to help grow and provide housing to their community. And they came back and said, you need more rentals and you need, more single family homes. And you really need to focus on what this is called missing middle product. And so I don't know if you guys have ever heard that term before, but basically it is exactly what cottage style BTR is. It's the missing middle between a single family home and an apartment complex. So it's something that fits in between. And most people say, okay, well, that's a townhome. Yeah, it's kind of like a townhome, but it could be, even smaller than that. You can get into some of these cottage style 1-2 bedroom units as well as being missing middle. And basically, both for sale and for rent, they're pushing that this is a big need in a lot of areas, to be honest. And a lot of this goes back to the way our zoning codes were written, you know, 20, 30 years ago. There was a kind of this missing middle product that was not allowed in a lot of places. It's kind of put a disparity between these two product types. You either have a single family home or you've got, apartment complex type products in most places.
So, Cedar Walk was the first project in Carlton before Cedar Mills. Is that true? And Daniel, I heard that Cedar Walk had one of the fastest lease ups and the highest rents in the market. How did this success shape the vision for Cedar Mills?
Yeah, so we did have really good rent up, and it is the most expensive product in the city of Carrollton as far as rentals go. We originally started that townhome project. It's a townhome community There's 46 units there. And we originally started actually as a for sale product. And kind of once we got started, because of, I'd say, because of the market and some of the aspects of BTR that we really like, specifically like kind of a long-term hold and, cash flow perspective, we decided to switch over from a for sale to for rent product there and finished out the rest of the units. And it's done really well. We've kept 95% plus occupancy. We've even had a waiting list in some instances for units. And we felt like it's shown that there's a great need in this area for, a nicer product than what's currently available. Something that was shown in the advisory group's report that was done for City of Carrollton is that I believe over 60% of the people who work in the City of Carrollton live outside the City of Carrollton. And so the idea is that if we can provide better housing options inside the city, they would most likely move closer to work.
Yeah, you kind of covered my next question, but there were definitely some highlights that are kind of pinged at me. You've got a market that's got the strong job growth. You mentioned that very little new multifamily supply or that missing middle product. Was there anything else that really stood out about Carrollton when you guys were first looking at a new market to build in?
I could say that between the Cedar Walk project and Cedar Mill, we decided to make some changes, right? So the Cedar Walk product, all those units are almost 2,000 square feet. They're all 3-bedroom, 2.5 to 3-bedroom, 3.5 units. So large units for rentals, basically, right? A high price point. We've had a good number of doctors moving into the Tanner medical system there that have rented, high earning nurses, business owners. So it's a high end product for the area. And so when we went to the next one, we said, you know what? We still think there's a great demand here, but we need to try to meet the middle income area with this next product. And so that's what shifted us to the cottage style units. We've got a few 3-bedroom units, but out of the total 171 units, there's, I think, maybe 28. So we really pulled back on those 3-bedroom units, and we really focused on the 2-bedroom being our highest number of units and 1-bedroom units, right? We also found that people really liked having a garage in the townhomes. We've got 2 floor plan types at the townhomes. One has a full double car garage. The other one just has like a drive under portico, and the ones with the garages rent really well. And so we pushed to try to get as many garages into this new unit type that we could. We felt like that was something that, get in traditional garden style multi and a lot of multifamily products, and something that people in that area really liked.
So, Daniel, now let's pivot a little bit into the risks of construction. So we all know that investors get nervous about building in states where there is a high risk of hurricane or storms, right? So you talked about using some newer construction technologies like SIP panels and prefab steel stud walls. How do these choices give investors peace of mind?
Yeah, sure. Huffman Group has a separate company called Huffman Built, which is our licensed GC company. And something we didn't talk about is we also do property management in-house of all of our assets. And so we've been doing that for over 10 years now. That's through a separate company called Simply Rent. And so Simply Rent manages our properties as well as other third-party assets for other people. But yeah, one of the things that we really try to focus on new construction is because we typically hold our assets longer than just the build and rent up period, which is generally about 3 years. We focus a lot on the quality of the construction. Long term, what are things that are going to last longer and have less maintenance issues, right? And so for a lot of multifamily developers, unfortunately, they're looking very short term, and so they don't consider these items quite as much as you might hope. And that goes towards the SIP panel. So we've used SIP panels, which stands for structurally insulated panels, on a couple projects in the past. Essentially, it's 2 pieces of OSB that have EPS foam, or foam that you would see in a cooler, white foam. And they press the 2 together and make very large panels. Use those for the exterior walls and the roofs. And they kind of go up, almost like Legos very quickly. And so there's some big advantages to using SIPs. So I'll go through a couple of them. First one is you create an extremely airtight building. So by putting these together like this, there's very few seams. They're generally sealed with caulk. And so you're talking about a building that generally on average costs about 30 to 35% less in energy to heat and cool than a normal stud built structure. Second one is that you create, generally, depending on the type, but most of our homes have got pitched roofs in Georgia. You create a conditioned attic space, is what it's called. And this allows you to place your HVAC equipment in that area. And this is another thing that increases efficiency. If you think about a normal attic space, that doesn't have insulation basically up in the rafters, you're running ductwork through an area that many times can get to be 115, 120 degrees in the summertime, right? You think about some of the inefficiencies of trying to run, 60-degree air through a duct when you've got 115-degree air around it. And so this semi-conditioned space really helps reduce cost. Way another big one, and in Carrollton in particular, there's not big hurricane risk, but your insurance costs are less with a SIP structure, right? The structure is also stronger and withstands wind loads between 165 and 185 mile an hour winds. And so this becomes an even bigger issue when you do build on the coast. So for, I don't know, some people, if they're familiar with multifamily and been in a few deals, if you've got some that are on the coast, you may have seen your performance, your performance suffer in the past 4 or 5 years because of insurance costs increase, in some instances almost doubling what they were the previous year. And so, this, I'd say resiliency and how we build has become a big, big issue for anything that's around the coast. I mean, sometimes in other areas, you saw what happened up in Asheville when they had that huge rainstorm event. So, there's the ways that you put together the roofs and different things like that with SIPs are very different than a normal wood stud structure. I'd say those are some of the big differences between the two product types. I'll say the last one, this is big, but it doesn't affect tenants as much as it does builders. But the time to construct a SIP building is much less than a typical wood stud structure. So generally, with a building of this size, we can be from the slab to a dried in state in about 2 to 3 days. So that's walls up, roof on, windows in, doors in. And I'd say that on a typical build, that's generally probably like 2 weeks for a structure of this size. And so because of that, we can try to reduce our total construction time on each individual unit and then, as a whole. And some of the things that helps with us as a builder is interest costs on construction loans these days are high. So the quicker that we can get something done, we can generally take those assets and put them in a lower interest rate loan once they're complete. So we save money on interest costs by using SIP panels.
Well, you kind of nailed my next questions. My next questions were going to be how the new technologies affects the cost of construction and insurance.
Yeah.
That's perfect. No, you nailed it.
Well, I'll talk to you guys about a couple other ones that are not SIP panels that are becoming really big in the multifamily industry. And one of them is, how do you describe this? Water monitoring, maybe the best way that I can describe it. But basically, insurance companies are giving huge reductions in premiums by using meters that monitor water usage for individual units and also for buildings as a whole.
These like sensors for monitoring for things like leaks and stuff. Would that be
exactly?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, I think the number one loss that gets claimed on insurance is water related loss, right? So water intrusion or water leaks inside of a home. And so they have meters nowadays that you can place that, create a network around the community and then notify you, like, they've got like AI involved with them now. So, if there's water running between 2 and 5 a.m., it sends an alert. Hey, this guy, is probably not taking a shower at 2 to 5 a.m. Something's going wrong. They can even detect down to like the single toilet, basically, if it's sitting there and running water for a while. And this can basically, save a lot of money up for the tenants and the owners as well.
Yeah.
In addition to that, they have, leak sensors that you can place in normal areas where you might see a leak around an air conditioner, hot water heater, underneath the sink. And you can start placing these in different areas. And if they get wet, then they notify you as well. So some pretty cool stuff that's going on in the multifamily industry. And a lot, all of our new products have got some smart home features as well. So we'll place a smart lock and a smart thermostat that they can control from their phone. They can gain access to the amenities and stuff through their phone and different things like that. So there's some cool stuff that's happening on some of the new build side as well.
Yeah, that's great, actually. Yeah, all these technology and the devices, they greatly help in reducing the cost, whether it is, the water utility bill or the damages. It definitely prevents it.
Yeah.
And most of these sensors, I know they are based on satellite or signal, right? Just like using a cell phone towers.
I'd say yes in some instances. In other instances, I think some of the water sensors are using, it's called like low RAN or low. It's like a different frequency.
Wi-Fi? Is it Wi-Fi?
Yeah. I think that Google has actually been using it or no, sorry, Amazon. I can't remember. There's some Loran or something like that. But essentially, you've got a few little receivers around the community that
Okay,
catch all that information, and then they take it basically back to the internet.
got it. They're
But
creating a local network and then
yeah,
transmitting it. Got it. Got it.
hmm
Yeah. So, okay.
I don't
Anyway,
know.
Daniel, now let's dig into the numbers. Cedar Mills
Sure.
is projected to deliver 25 to 30% IRR over a 4-year period. Full period. Walk us
hmm
through how you get there, the construction timeline, the rent growth, and the exit assumptions.
Sure. Yeah. 170 units. Did a pro forma based on getting construction debt at around 70% loan to cost. I believe that debt was it's based on SOFR, so it floats a little bit before you lock it in, but I think that's around the 8.5% range. One of the big things I haven't spoken about is the basis that we've got in the lands. We went directly to the seller of this piece of land. It was not publicly marketed. We put it under contract for 900,000. We took it through the zoning process ourselves and got it approved for the 171 units. And then we actually purchased that last year. Prior to us purchasing it, we did get an appraisal. It came in at $2.8 million. So I would say that is a big contributor to the returns that we're able to make on this one. So we're putting that land into the deal at our basis because we do construction in house. I think that's one of the other things that's pretty favorable for us. We are making a small 5% GC fee, but we are cognizant of the products that we use and try to keep things within budget. We don't have a lot of rent growth from current projections through to the time that we're coming out with the units. I think maybe 3%. Right. Trying to think what else. Some people look at untrended yield on cost. So we're above 7% on that. Based on the construction costs of our previous townhome project, we're coming in around $125 per square foot hard construction costs. So we feel like that's a very good number. Just to speak in general about ground up development versus existing multi, because I know that is something that comes up with a lot of investors. With ground up development, you're going to invest your money and we've got to build the asset, obviously, and rent up the unit. So there's no cash flow coming from the product for the first, 2 years, basically. Then you're going to get a little bit coming out before we either refinance or sell after stabilization. That's generally by year 3. And, that's one of the reasons why you're creating value much more than you would or could if you were purchasing an existing asset, right? Trying to do a value add or just improve rents. And we've purchased existing multifamily as well and have done plenty of those deals. There's some perceived increased risk from ground up development because there are unforeseen conditions that can occur, right? We all saw some of the things that happened during COVID. In fact, our last project, we were building through COVID and we saw huge spikes in lumber and things like that. We were still able to finish with a pretty good number and it's performed well. But, we feel like we do a pretty good job of limiting those risks as much as possible by doing all the upfront due diligence that we do before breaking ground.
Hey, Daniel, one of the things I noticed is Huffman Group, they're putting in 10% of their own equity into the project. I know Pramod and I, when we're raising capital for other projects, it's important to us to make sure we're also investing our capital on deals. Why do you think that's an important thing for investors to know?
Yeah, I've heard of some people purchasing existing multi without having any of their own money in the deal. I think, if they're able to do that, that's great. We've also invested in some deals ourselves, and we always like to see that the GP's got some skin in the game, right? I think that in order to keep everybody's interests aligned, everybody needs to have some of their money in the deals. We don't mind putting some in, and we plan on trying to continue to do more projects like this. We've got 2 more lots that we're taking through rezoning, one in Florida and one in Alabama. So that's kind of our thesis: is that the GP should have at least 10% in. Sometimes more.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. So, no.
That's great. That's great. So, Daniel, I'll ask you 2-part questions. Given the current economic scenario and as you hear about tariffs or whatnot with the current administration, how do you think, are you prepared or how do you think are you going to handle this situation? That's the first one. And the second one is build to rent is clearly a model you believe in. Looking ahead, do you see Huffman Group continuing to focus on this space, or are there any other types of projects you are exploring?
Sure, yeah. So I'll talk to the tariffs first. So I think I just saw a story where Trump was thinking about increasing tariffs on on cabinetry and some other items that get
Just
imported.
today, right?
Yeah, from outside the country.
30% or something.
So fortunately, we purchased our cabinets from the U.S., so I'm covered there. We have on all of our projects. In fact, we have an in-house cabinet dealership, so we became a dealer of several different cabinet lines in the U.S. a while back. Actually, when we were doing all these renovations on single-family homes, I was pretty surprised by the cost of cabinets. And so I just reached out to a few, and we, do the designs in house and purchase them directly from the manufacturer. So we save some costs that way on all of our projects. To date, I haven't seen any big issues with tariffs. I think there's always ways you can try to pivot, right? So we did talk a little bit about a cold form steel, or you mentioned it previously. So, that's something that you can try to pivot to if lumber costs increase significantly. Those types of products will come back to being more feasible. Light fixtures we haven't seen any issues with. Flooring we haven't seen any issues with yet. So, and a lot of times I feel like these numbers surprise people and then they end up coming back to something more normalized. So I'll call it, part of Trump's negotiating strategy. So, yeah.
And how about, Huffman Group? Are you going to continue to focus in this space or any other types of projects you are exploring?
Yeah, definitely. So we're definitely going to continue putting together BTR projects. We think it's a great product type. We think it's going to continue to grow over the next 5 to 10 years. At the same time, in today's market, there's been some deals that we've looked at on existing multi. There's some softness in the market. There's, definitely some projects that are struggling, due to debt. I think that at least in the Atlanta market, there's been some softness in rents and occupancy. There were so many new projects that came online in this area, and I think that's happened around the country. When rates were super low, there was tons of new multi that were getting started, right? And they've all kind of finished around the same timeline. And just reading some stories on Atlanta, we've had some historic absorption rates, which is great. But at the same time, a lot of these complexes are offering 1 or 2 or 3 months of free rent. And that's pulling people who would have, most likely been in maybe a B class asset or something that wasn't brand new to newer assets. And it's drawing down occupancy in some of those other projects. And especially for owners who have delayed doing, CapEx improvements, they're seeing their occupancies drop dramatically. They've got an older asset and there's newer assets that are out there and they're having a hard time renting their units. So we've bid on a few distressed deals. We had one under contract a few months ago, and we're going to continue to look at those kind of things. We feel like we have a really good story with our in-house GC to come in and do value add deals. We've done several of those in the past, and we feel like our property management is pretty good. So those are the two things that we concentrate on.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And all these deals you're doing in and around the Atlanta metro area?
Yeah, I'd say most of them have been around the Atlanta metro area.
That's great.
All right, Daniel, before we let you go, we're going to do something that we like to do with all our guests. We call it the lightning round. It's a very creative title, I know. We're just going to ask you a couple quick, short questions, quick answers. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool, let's do it.
All right, okay. Daniel, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning person, but I wasn't always that way. I'd say if you caught me in college, I would have been a night owl for sure.
Yeah, I think we all do that.
Yeah.
We're wiser now, and the early morning hours are great.
Yeah.
Let's see. Podcast or book that's had an impact on you?
I'll choose book, The Miracle Morning. If you guys have not read it, it's fantastic. It talks about getting into a routine of doing a certain number of things in the morning, kind of get yourself ready for the day. Really great book that my brother recommended to me. I read last year.
Miracle Morning?
The Miracle Morning.
Okay.
Yeah,
we'll definitely look into that. Okay. Most underrated market people aren't talking about enough.
Underrated market. I mean, we're talking about real estate, right?
Yes. It can be like Atlanta area or the Alabama area, something like that.
That's for like an area of the market. Okay.
Huntsville.
Yeah, I'd say
Mobile.
I think this is happening, but I don't know that a lot of people are talking about it. But I think that things are moving to smaller suburbs that didn't get overbuilt in this last cycle. So more and more people I'm hearing are going for building in some of these smaller suburbs as well as finding deals. Some of the large, everybody knows the large metros. And I think that in some of them, many of them, they got overbuilt with a lot of units. But many times these smaller markets get overlooked and there's still great demand.
Something like tertiary markets, you're saying, referring to?
I'm saying tertiary markets. Yeah. I think tertiary markets for the next couple of years. And, I didn't speak to this before, but, being able to start a new multifamily complex when there's not a lot of other starts in your area is a great advantage, right? So we feel like right now is a great time to start a new multi. You have to try to look 2 to 3, 2 to 3 years out and what you think the market's going to be like then, not what it is right now. And, because there's so few that are starting, we feel like there's going to be a greater demand when we get to the finish line.
Got it. I like how you kept any specific markets you have in mind kind of off the record there. Maybe we'll talk offline.
Okay.
But that was a good answer. Let's see, cash flow or appreciation. You only get to choose one of those. Which one and why?
Cash flow or appreciation? This one's really tough. I saw this one before. I think I would go with appreciation. And the reason I think I'd go with appreciation is because as long as my assets continue to appreciate, I could sell it, number one, and get out, make money, versus if it was underwater, but it's still cash flowing, as far as the asset value. And number two, I can also refinance and pull cash out. So
yes, that's right.
I like that better than selling, paying taxes on that money.
And you're not paying taxes on it.
Correct, exactly.
Appreciation.
So what is the worst deal you have ever done, and what lesson did you learn?
We did a for sale product called Vickery Falls. The deal went fine. I'd say, we sold everything out. We made some money, not as much as we had hoped, but I learned a good bit during the process. It was a complicated build. It was 4 stories of wood over a parking deck slab with parking underneath. We had issues with subcontractors. So, we had damage that was created by subcontractors. And so, I learned a lot about, I'd say, how to monitor what these guys are doing in the field, staying on top of them more regularly, things that, I now place into my subcontractor agreements, different things like that. Basically, we had a sub that damaged a bunch of the windows on the site, and they were not cheap to fix. And so we ended up getting in a lawsuit over that. We did win. I'd say that it wasn't a complete failure, but we learned some lessons through the process.
Sounds like a tough deal as you guys came out on top, which is cool. Congrats on that.
Yeah.
If you weren't in real estate, what would you be doing right now?
Weren't in real estate. Music. I'd say music. Yeah. I really enjoy music.
All right.
I'm not I don't play guitar really well. I did drums when I was younger. I could say I could play drums, but yeah, something to do with music.
Great. That was fun. Thanks for playing along, Daniel, on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
appreciate it, guys.
awesome. It was great having you on. Before you wrap up, just want to give you the floor one last time. Tell all of our listeners how to get a hold of you, maybe how to get involved in the Cedar Mills deal, or any future opportunities you might have coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, so you can reach us at huffman.group. There's a contact page there. My email also is daniel@huffman.group. So you can reach out that way. Send you more information on Cedar Mill or other deals that we've got here in the future. We've got a newsletter where we send out new opportunities when they come out to any future investors. So I'd be happy for you to reach out.
Daniel, thanks again for joining us today. This was a great conversation about build to rent and the Cedar Mills project.
And to listeners, make sure to subscribe, share the episode, and check out the show notes for Daniel's contact information. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.